Okay, everyone, welcome to my analysis for episode 5. There is a ton of stuff going on in this episode. Um, so honestly, I'm a little bit pressed for time here this weekend, and some of it I might just have to glaze over really quickly, and I may come back to it and do a deeper dive later on because there's so many things going on here that I feel like I need to do a separate analysis of. And I just don't know if I'm going to have the time to do it all today. So I will do my best. As always, there's going to be major plot spoilers for Daryl Dixon episode 5 in this video. Do not watch this until you have watched the episode. Otherwise, you are going to be spoiled. And that will be your fault because now I've warned you. All right, so let's just dive in here. So of course they are still, we've got Daryl and Carol and Antonio still looking for Roberto and Justina. And they come among, or they come upon, I guess I should say, another divergent path. We are getting a lot of symbols of divergent paths here, which of course brings me back to the episode Divergent, which was one of the bonus episodes in season 10. But remember before I said that there was a scene where Daryl said there were tracks going both ways, and I wasn't really sure what the point of that was. We have it here again, and it's a little bit clearer why they have it in this episode. It's because he says two people went one way and three people went the other. Now they hear walkers, so they follow the path where the three people went, and it turns out that that was Roberto and two of the men who took him, which just suggests that the other one man took Justina the other way. So there are two different paths going on here. Um, I'm not sure exactly what this suggests symbolically, but it's kind of obvious here, I guess. And that is that if Justina represents Beth, which clearly she's been taken, Roberto's looking for her, clearly she's a Beth parallel. We have two different paths here. We have the split, the schism in the paths that, it just represents after Grady, she went one way and the rest, Daryl and the rest of Team Family, Daryl and Carol specifically here, went a different way, right? And so I think that's kind of what they're trying to do, trying to show. It's just very, very symbolic. So they see this is where he says three went down here. That's Roberto. Two went that way. Um, and then they hear the walkers, so they go to get Roberto. Now Roberto is hanging suspended from a bridge. Me and my fellow theorists are talking about this. We have actually seen this quite a few times in the past, and I'm starting to get an idea. I actually think they define in a lot of ways what the symbol means, or at least part of it. Maybe not all of it, but a good chunk of it. So to recall, we were talking a few days ago about the big spot in 401 and how there is a walker hanging suspended that comes through the ceiling and startles everyone, remember? Now that's a little bit different. It's a walker rather than a live person. And he's not hanging from a bridge, he's hanging from the ceiling. So not all the details are the same, but we still have him suspended in the air. So there was that. And of course, there was a ton of Beth symbolism there. And the other thing that I just want to draw your attention to for a minute is the fact that there were helicopters on the roof. So the walker that came through would have been part of that, part of whatever that was. And we do think that was the CRM. I mean, the helicopters especially point to the CRM since Rick was taken away in a helicopter. There's a real military presence going on there, and the CRM is the Civic Republic Militia, right? Things like that. The next time I can remember that we saw this suspension from a bridge sort of thing came in season 6. It may have been Always Accountable. It was either that episode or the one right after it, but it wasn't part that was focused on Daryl and Dwight. It was Sasha and Abraham. Remember, they were together and they were waiting for Daryl to come find them. And there was a part that was always kind of random to me. It took me a while to figure out what it was all about, where Abraham sees a walker who is dangling from the bridge, a whole lot like this. But he wants the walker's gun. Like the walker is a military walker, once again. So we have that military aspect. And Abraham just wants the walker's gun. So he goes out and tries to get it, and then things get really hairy and really dangerous. Like he almost goes over the side and ends up like shouting, like just yelling, kind of. But he finally manages to get the gun, and the walker falls, which actually gives Abraham a whole lot of confidence, that he was able to do that. So then the next one that we, harken back to with this is in 701. So this was right after Negan killed Glenn and Abraham. And we have this whole bit where the saviors are chasing these people called the librarians. And this was another little group that was just kind of there and gone, and we didn't learn a whole lot about them. They were called the librarians because they were living in a library. And the last one that was alive was hung from a bridge, and they spray painted an X on him. And if you remember, this is when, you had Negan and Rick in the RV, and Rick jumped over a whole bunch of walkers and grabbed onto this guy who was hanging there. But they end up burning his body, and he does die. But we were really kind of fixated on him when that episode was going on because of the X, and the X is a Beth symbol. So it was just kind of strange. And then it was there and gone. Obviously, not much came of it. So we have that, and now we have Roberto. Now, I've said before that the bridge, there's not a bridge in every single one of those situations, but in a lot of them there are. And the bridge, I think, always represents, a coming brush with death in some way. So we had Daryl and Carol falling off the bridge in Consumed, which was right before Beth was shot. And then we had a bridge around Madison right before her death fake out. So in a way, the bridge might almost even represent a coming death fake out, which I still think is a big possibility here that there might be some sort of death fake out for one of the characters here in Daryl Dixon season 3. But anyway, here you can see why they used this with Roberto, because when his father ran and found him, he didn't know if he was still alive. And even as the episode ends, he's still kind of hovering between life and death. So the name of the episode, Limbo, actually tells us a lot about what this is. When we see someone hanging this way, it's almost like they either were or are in limbo between life and death, and it's like it could go either way. So if you think about it, the one in the big spot, clearly that one's the one that's a little bit different, and I might even say it doesn't fit into the symbolism exactly if it weren't for the helicopters on the roof, because I'm going to show you here that that's part of it. So basically, I think what this means, or at least what part of it means, is you have a larger organization that is usually villainous, and this is like something that is a remnant of them or something that they've done. So like I said, when the walker comes through the ceiling in 401, the big spot, the helicopters represent that it's part of the CRM. And even though this is a walker, so clearly this person is already dead, maybe they were left alive, and there was just no way to convey that. But by the time Daryl's group gets there, they've passed on. With Abraham, I mean, he was in limbo. It was not clear whether he was going to survive or fall off the bridge, right? And then he did survive. With the librarian guy, he was still alive when they hung him from the bridge, so it was pretty brutal. He does end up dying, right? And then we have Roberto here, who he seems to be dead, but he is not, and he actually lives. So you see what I mean? How it's like they're in limbo, and it really could go either way. So it's really interesting to see this. Now we had something like this in France in one of either season 1 or 2 of Daryl Dixon, and we're looking into that, but it's a really interesting symbol, right? These guys are wanting him to suffer. They're having fun with this. They're obviously bad guys. They make a bet of whether it's going to be 2 hacks to get through the rope or 4. And anyway, that doesn't really get very far. He only hacks the rope once, and then Daryl's group shows up and shoots both of them and distracts the walkers, and are able to cut Roberto down. Now, this part is actually really interesting because you see a lot of sympathy on both Daryl and Carol's faces here as Antonio is hugging Roberto. And I'm assuming that they kind of thought he was dead, but then you do hear Antonio say, no, he's breathing, he's still alive. Now, this could go a lot of ways. They have sympathy for him because obviously there's a lot here to have sympathy for. For Carol, I mean, this has got to be bringing her back to Sophia coming out of the barn, wondering if her child is alive, and seeing him hug Roberto and say, my son, my son. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of probably where she is. But Daryl, he really, his reaction here is interesting. He takes a knee and he's looking at this guy, and seems to have a lot of sympathy here. And I'll show you this at the end, but during the episode Insider, they actually talked about this and about how this episode is where Daryl really 100% gets on board with the Roberto Justina story. Before, he's been very, very resistant to it. They, nothing we can do about it. They're old enough to make their own decisions. He just didn't really want to get involved, and this is where he really, really gets involved. And that's pretty much all they say. But I think it's here that we actually see that happen, because his whole demeanor changes here. So I'm wondering if there is something about this, and I'm going to mention this more as we go throughout this episode. There's a lot of things in this episode that I think point to things we don't know that happened during the missing 17 days. And it's really making my head spin because there's things that I'm going, okay, they are trying to tell us something here, and I don't know what it is, and it's so frustrating. But it's because we just haven't seen that stuff yet. So all I'm saying is that maybe this here, something about this, is reminding him of Beth and of those missing 17 days. I mean, did he do this with Beth? Did he hold her the way that Antonio is holding Roberto? I don't know. Like we didn't see it, so we don't know. But something about this struck a very, very, very deep chord with Daryl and made him very sympathetic to what's going on. So that's really interesting, and I just wish we had more context for what it is. But yes, 100%, I do think it is a Beth thing. Um, so then Roberto starts talking. Now, there's one thing here that confused me, and my fellow theorists aren't sure what it means either. So if anybody does, please let us know. So he starts telling them what happened with Justina. He says, I had to see her. I had to see her. She was with them, Dad. I find her. We drive away. But then we hear them come after us. So we've seen a few of these before where he tries to get her out, but these guys show up and he says, and they took her again. And Carol says, took her, so she didn't volunteer. So this is interesting. We weren't sure exactly what happened before, but she did not volunteer. So, I mean, Roberto was right when he said, why would she do that? Why would she volunteer when we've made promises to each other? I was thinking that maybe she did in some way, but it was like one thing led to another, and there was like, specific reasoning behind it, and she felt like there was nothing else she could do. So it would be kind of understandable, not because she wanted to leave Roberto, but just because she was kind of forced into it by circumstances. But what they're saying here is no, she never wanted to go. She never volunteered. It was 100% she was taken. Okay. Beth, anybody? And not only that, but taken twice, right? And so, I mean, this is something that Daryl could have said about Beth after she was shot. I found her. Like, I got her back. We were together in the hallway. And then they took her again. And in that case, because she was shot, right? It also it speaks to Gabriel's speech to Sasha about sacrificing one of their own. That was not something that she volunteered for, right? So really, really interesting dialogue here. Then he says, Fede lied all along and cheated. And Antonio says he cheated. And he says the Ravens, she was never chosen. I am unclear about what the Ravens is referencing. Um, I think just from context, what he's saying here is that Fede cheated because he, like we said before, like maybe she had been chosen several times, and he said she wasn't. So he's saying he's been cheating all along. Um, and that's why she was never chosen. I think that's what he's trying to say, but I don't know what the raven is. Maybe the ribbon that had the names on it, but I don't remember them being called ravens before. Like, I don't remember any mention of ravens at all. So if anybody knows exactly what he means when he says that, let me know, because it's just a little bit confusing to me. And then Antonio says, how could he do that? She says she will tell everyone if he doesn't stop La Ofrenda. And so Fede, where he actually sacrificed his niece because she was threatening to tell if he didn't put a stop to the girls. So, I mean, again, Justina was trying to help these girls, right? And so she was saying, I know that you've been cheating. I know that I got picked more than once and you said somebody else's name. And if you don't stop giving these girls to El Alcathar, I can never say that right. I apologize if I'm butchering it. The king and everything, the people who take the girls, then I'm going to tell everyone that you're cheating. So he gave her to them because she was going to tell. Okay. Yeah, that makes Fede a scumbag. I have really liked him up till this point, and now I'm disappointed in him. But you guys I'm sure you already have, but think about the parallels to Grady and the women there that were, the wards that were being abused by the men, and how many parallels there are here. And it makes me wonder if part of the reason that, whether it was part of the reason she was shot or part of the reason they went and got her when she was left in the car or whatever it was that happened was because she just knew too much. I think that what we kind of already know that they didn't show us everything at Grady. There was a lot that they were just really blowing past and not giving us details on and hinting at, but not actually showing us or talking about. So I think that there's a lot more that Beth knew about that operation and what was going on than what they showed us, than what we, the audience, know. Um, about the only secret she had was that uh, Edwards lied and had her kill. Um, oh, okay, I'm blanking on that guy's name. Anyway, the guy that he had her give the wrong drugs to, who was a doctor. And that was really more, though, about Edward's self-preservation. It wasn't necessarily about the big picture of what was going on, at least not that we know of. But that doesn't seem like enough of a secret for them to take Beth out for. I mean, I think it's got to be bigger than that. So anyway, just something I was thinking about because here Justina specifically said, "You stop this, or I'm going to tell," and that's what got her sacrificed to this group. Um, so Antonio, of course, wants to get him back for medical treatment. Carol says, "I don't know if is safe enough, knowing what we know," and he said, "Yeah, but they have medicine that will help him." So then, oh, he does show him the. It's important for later on that Antonio gives the compass back to Roberto. Um, she was with me and now I've lost her. That's what I was saying earlier. So then Daryl says, how about we lie about it? We just say he got jumped on the road. That'll throw Fayday off. He can get better. She says that could work, but um, it's funny that Daryl calls her a liar here. And I don't think he's being insulting. He just knows it's one of those things that shows, and I really kind of like this about the show. They sometimes will give us hints that the characters do watch each other and do absorb things. We saw that actually with Beth in um, Still when she said, I was like you when that little girl came out of the barn. I remember the look on your face. So she was watching him and she was absorbing what he was doing. And we see that Daryl's doing that too. So the whole time, like in Alexandria, when Carol was pretending to be, sweet and innocent and not someone who knew how to survive, we didn't really see Daryl, I guess a little bit when she came out and he told her she looked ridiculous, but we don't see him reacting to the lie specifically. He was reacting to the clothing she was wearing. But it's obvious that he watches her and he knows that she was doing that. You know what I mean? So that we see that these characters do pay attention to each other. And I think they don't always show that on screen in real time just because of they have so limited screen time that they couldn't, they can't take up time doing that. But they give us hints that they are really in tune with each other and what they're doing. Anyway, so once again, this is Daryl trying to resist things a little bit again. What are we going to do about Justina? And I don't think there's anything we can do about that. Um, she says, they've helped us too much, especially me. And he, I'll just go after her myself. And he, that's kind of it for him. He's like, no, you're not going to go. I love this too. Stop telling me what I can and can't do. Once again, they're fighting like siblings. Um, so this is where, of course, Daryl volunteers to go to Barcelona. Um, I'm coming with you. And he says, no, you're not 100%. Basically, go with them and hot dogs. So I almost feel like I was trying to figure this out. My first impression here that this feels like the time. So if we're comparing it to season 5 and the season 5 template, this feels like the time when him and Carol jumped in the car and went looking for Beth. Up till now, I mean, when Justina was taken, that would have been lining up with when Beth was taken from the funeral home. Now we have her, having been taken someplace else, and he's going to actually go look for her. The difference, of course, is that Carol is not going with him, but we have that divergence again. So maybe it's to show that, the divergence, among other things, is to show that Carol actually won't be with him the first time. Although I did wonder if maybe while he's gone, their town could get attacked again or something, and she could get taken, and then she would be with the same people Justina is with. I don't know. We'll see. But the divergence could show a little bit of a divergence in the actual template. But then here he says hot dogs, and I mean you could almost read that as because if hot dogs is a Beth and Sirius symbol, the obvious thing that he's trying to say here is don't worry, I'll be back. I'm not going to get hurt, and we'll still eat the hot dogs and go home basically. But it almost sounds too like he's like, no, it's okay, I'm leaving. Hot dogs, like going to find Beth. That's I don't know if that's what they're going for, but this so much about this just made me smile. All right, so they go home, they take Roberto home. Then we have Roberto being sick. They have this medicine that soothes him that's basically alcohol. It's with spices and herbs in it. I actually looked up the word. The word translates to the burn, which makes sense for alcohol. But I mean, I feel like this is them giving him um, it's moonshine, basically. But it's just like a Spanish version of it and a medicinal version of it. Now, I know that there are theorists who believe that the moonshine and the alcohol symbol in general is indicative of the cure, and this really backs that up because they're using alcohol to cure him, to treat him medicinally. So this was really interesting. So this is where he's describing it, a special brandy remedy. The Megas know how to brew. And this made me smile too. Like witches? And originally he says no, and then he goes, well, yes. And then right after he says that, they start doing this. This feels like Macbeth and the three witches in their incantations. So it's, I mean, I loved it. It's great. And then Path says, if it doesn't fix him, at least it will make him drunk. So that just feels like still callbacks to me. Um, okay, so then we have Fede talking about everything that's happened, and he asks them what's going on with Roberto. But this part was interesting, and I ran this past my fellow theorists. We don't really have a hard and fast theory yet. They tell this really random story that doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything, but that's exactly what makes me think it's symbolic, right? His cousin Raul's family used to live a couple of houses down. Um, and they used to call Antonio Tonetti. Now I had to look that up. I didn't know what that meant exactly. And it's so if you think of his name, Antonio, short for that would be Tony. So Tonetti is like a diminutive. It's short for Antonio, but it also means priceless or indispensable, right? So they used to call him Tonetti. And then it says why. They say Raul would show up every night for dessert and act like he just happened to be there. Like, oh, it was just a coincidence. Oh, you're having dessert, you know? So it was just kind of a joke. They all laughed. And then Fede says Maria was the best baker in Solaz. So the reason that I'm assuming from the context, the reason everyone called him Tonetti, you know, it was a shortened form of his name, but it also meant indispensable or priceless, is because his wife was the best cook. So he was indispensable because you could get good food at his house, right? So it was just kind of a joke and something that was a lot of camaraderie, I think, between the people who lived there. But Carol also doesn't know who this is. She says Maria, and he says, oh, it's Roberto's mother. So I hadn't even really been thinking of it this way, but in this sense, Antonio is also a parallel to Daryl. I mean, if you think about it, you know, his wife, who I'm assuming was the love of his life, who he lost years ago, and he doesn't really talk about her. He's mentioned her very briefly in passing to Carol a few times just to um, explain certain parts of his life, you know, and when he's telling her what happened. But he doesn't really talk about her. And I didn't realize the extent to which he doesn't talk about her until this part. He's never said her name, at least not to Carol. And that's a lot like Daryl and Beth, right? And at this part, as soon as they mention Maria and he says Roberto's mother, both him and Fede get really weird about it again. He frowns and looks down and away, and Fede, I mean, again, we're getting hints about something that happened back then, but we don't know what it is. Um, Maybe we'll find out she just died really terribly, you know, and so mentioning her is a little bit like mentioning Beth to Daryl. It's just really, really painful. And so nobody likes to talk about it. But again, really interesting stuff going on here. And I don't know what's going on with the dessert thing. I assume that we'll maybe get more of that as we learn more about the history here. So I'll have to come back to it. But again, because it was so random and because it didn't go anywhere, it makes me think it's symbolic of something. And then he says Tonetti was a lucky man. Again, that's usually what you say when you're admiring someone's wife, and it doesn't always have to be romantic on your part, but I don't know, it's something that guys say when they realize a girl they're crushing on is taken. Oh, well, he's a lucky man. You know what I mean? And so that does seem like he has romantic feelings again for Maria. So then he says what happened out there. They tell him this lie they've cooked up, that it was the banditos, and by the time they got to him, unconscious, and they took the car. Again, I think this is a little bit of a nod as well to Beth because she was left in a car. He says, what happened with the car? Gone. So the gone symbolism, they took it. he says, do you think it was the Primitivos? Now, these were the bone mask guys that attacked them last time, and they basically say, yeah, we think it was them. But he says, no, I don't think so, because they would have killed him. They're too vicious. They wouldn't have left him for dead. They would have killed him. But he says, was there any sign of El Alcazar? And they say no, which is untrue. They know that Justina took Alcazar, and they are the ones who were hung Roberto over the bridge, but they're just lying about it. And then he says, okay, I suppose that's for the best. I'm really curious to know why Fede is so pro Alcazar. I mean, he is wanting things to be really good with them. And I'm not sure I understand why. It just seems like he will go to any lengths to preserve that alliance. And it doesn't really seem worth it, you know? And to the point where he actually did sacrifice his niece, who he loved, because she was going to tell them something about him that would have put the alliance in jeopardy. So he sacrificed her. So he's putting that above everything. And it's like, dude, why? You know, hopefully we find out that there's a better answer for that than just he's a scumbag, you know? I don't know. I guess we'll see. Um, and this is another thing that I guess it didn't really register before, but also reminds me of Grady a little bit. He says, you know, we've seen him say this before. I know he behaved poorly, but I'll talk to him. He won't do that again. And Fede just says, yeah, we can talk about that later, basically. But it just reminds me of the rules at Grady. You know, at Grady, it was you had to make up for the resources you used, you know, whatever you took, you had to pay back. Here, it's just that there seems to be some sort of penance that you have to do when you break the rules or behave poorly. But he's also afraid of Roberto getting kicked out. So, anyway, just more of that. Then he asks about Daryl. She says he went to check on the boat, which is another lie, of course. And he just says, okay, well, let us know when he's coming back so that he can enter the village safely. That's very kind of you, but he's going to spend the night. And this Fede is a little bit suspect of. And this was kind of funny. Yeah, he's outdoorsy. That's like vast understatement when it comes to Daryl, but he says, yeah, he looks at, and the thing is, even though he had his doubts, he accepts this here. And he's like, okay, cool, you know. We'll discuss things later. I'm glad Roberto's doing good, and let's move forward. All right, so it seems that he has accepted their lie without a problem. Path is another uh, thing entirely, right? She's suspicious. She's like Daryl. She's very discerning, and she knows that it was Alcazar that did this. And first, Carol denies it, but then Antonio says it's okay. We can trust her. So they tell her. And then when Carol says that he went to get Justina, she's really kind of shocked by that, you know. So the whole point for this scene is something they're setting up for the next episode. If you watch the preview for next time, she's going to go help Daryl. So that's pretty much what that was. Okay, so then we move to Daryl in the desert. Now, they did say in the episode Insider that this was the most on-the-nose spaghetti western episode of the season, and 100%, you can see that in the way they do this. This was really fun. It was really action-packed. It was really cool. But first, we come to this blind man in the desert. Now, I'm actually really excited to find out what the Odyssey template part of this is, because I know that just before Odysseus returns home, he talks to a blind seer. And this most definitely is a representation of a blind seer. At first, we were thinking that because his eyes are bleeding, that he might have had the bleeding eye illness that we saw in season 4 of the show, you know, that was at the um, veterinary college. And then after that, everyone at the prison got sick. I actually don't think that's what's going on here. Um, his eyes have actually been torn out, and we see the reason for that later on. But it's not just that he's bleeding from his eyes, he does not have eyes, right? They have been ripped out. He starts asking for water. It's hot in the desert, and Daryl gives him water, which he drinks as much as he can of. Then there are vultures up ahead circling, and he says, Bone Crusher, he waits for me, you're next. And then he starts laughing. I mean, this guy's, his sanity is not entirely there. I had to look up what Bone Crusher was. Bone Crusher is a type of bird, a type of vulture that actually eats bones. And this is the type of bird, it lives in this part of the world. So he's basically saying the vultures are coming for me because he knows he's on his way to death. So this is another representation of that theme, of the limbo theme. This guy isn't dead yet, but his eyes have been plucked out. He's losing his sanity. He doesn't have any water. And there's not a whole lot Daryl can do for him, but if he just stays out there, he's gonna die in within a few days at most. And then, yeah, the vultures are probably going to eat him when he dies. So he is being prophetic, and that's probably true. But you see that he's in limbo. He's not dead yet, but he's on his way. He's not trying that hard to live, and he's sort of accepting his death right here. And then he says, "You're next." So Daryl gets back on the bike and leaves him. He starts asking for water again. I will talk about the water symbol here in a minute. Daryl actually sees this train, but he doesn't know what it is, and it doesn't really concern him. So at first, he just takes off, right? He's just like, okay, that's weird. And then he keeps riding. Then we have this dude inside the train. Him and his woman, and they're taking a bath, which means they clearly have plenty of water and smoking. But his guy comes and gets him and says, look, and they see Daryl riding away from them. But he wants Daryl's bike. And food for Lola. I didn't know what that meant at first. We find out. So this is just a shot of the inside of the train. This right here is an aquarium. This is where Lola is. We've got the greenery over here that they're smoking. And then we've got 3 white birds and the moon. I can't really tell what kind of birds these are, honestly. Like, it's a little too not non-specific to figure. I don't know if someone can tell what kind of birds they are, but I think there's not enough detail to really figure out the species of bird. But what this reminds me of is the painting in 509 of the cabin that Tyrese sees. Here we go. Okay, so this is the picture from 509. And disregard this arrow. I was pointing at something else at the time. I think I was pointing at the flag. This looks like the Moonshine Shack. It could be on fire, or this could be foliage. There's a dog on the porch. There's what seems to be a walker here, but it's looking into the cabin, so it could also represent someone watching them. But what I want to look at is this here, right? This bird. Does that not look like these birds? You see the similarities? That's all I wanted to point out. That's what that reminded me of. So then I think I got a couple of pictures of this because it's kind of blurry, but this dude is keeping eyeballs in a fishbowl and he's feeding them to his iguana. Okay, so this is what I think happened to the guy that Daryl saw in the desert. His eyes were plucked out by this guy. They left him alive, but they took his eyes. And there's a lot of symbolism to that, right? One eye being gone is serious symbolism. There's also the see no evil, hear no evil, which we actually saw more than once in this episode. But this is the aquarium for I think it's an iguana. See, and there's quite a few. So it's not just like he's only got the 2 eyeballs in here from the guy we saw. There's quite a few in here. Okay, so this guy's disgusting. He goes going around plucking out eyeballs and feeding them to his pet. So if there was any doubt, yeah, this is not a guy that we should like. So he sends his guys after Daryl to get Daryl's bike, and Daryl sees them. W.D. Way pointed out that it's very obvious. I don't think I got a picture of it here, but more than once, it shows a rear view mirror that Daryl can see behind him. And maybe that is to show that the past is important. He's having to look behind him, kind of a thing. But we saw it here. We see it later with the truck, too. This is the big, what felt like a joust to me, like a medieval joust, only with motorcycles and guns that we saw in the trailer. This was really fun. But I have more to say about this. just a little more. Okay, a lot. So let's go through the sequence when they go past. Maybe I'm gonna go back. Hold on. So the first shot Daryl takes, maybe I did not get a shot of. He hits the guy, but he hits his arm, right? Then the second shot misses. And then there's this, when they go right past each other, as they're passing, they both fire at one another simultaneously. And Daryl hits the guy's bike. And we've got fluid leaking out from, I assume this is the gas tank, and there's gas leaking out, right? So this guy's bike is toast. Now, here's a picture of him holding his arm where Daryl hit him in the arm right here. I'm going to come back to that. And then we see Daryl's bike laying here because he also killed Daryl's bike, right? And then I believe the next thing we see is Daryl walking in the desert. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to this again. You guys, they are trying to tell us something here, and I do not understand exactly what it is, but we have had these hints before. First of all, the guy gets hit in the arm. May not seem like much, but do you remember in 509? Okay, I found it. In 905, when Rick has his vision, everybody's dead, there's all this blood on Beth's arm. And that was baffling to us because we didn't see her get blood on her arm, but they're very obviously trying to show us this. They don't show her getting shot in the head. We don't even see blood in her hair, which we actually did see in Grady, or in Coda, I meant to say. But we don't know what this blood on her arm is. So that's one thing that jumped out about me, is that he got hit in the same place we see on Beth's arm here. Um, the next thing is Daryl's bike. It very obviously focuses on the bike, and this here is fluid that has leaked out of it. I'm assuming it's gasoline. And so he basically, the best way to kill a bike or to kill a vehicle is to shoot the gas tank, right? Because it can't go without the fluid. All the fluid will leak out, and it's just not going to work if there's a big hole in the gas tank. We actually saw that in season 4 when Abraham showed up. I talked about this pretty recently too, that Eugene shot up their big old army truck, right? And I always thought that that might have been sort of a foreshadow or a parallel to Beth getting shot because they actually did say he killed the truck, right? And this is similar. But what this strikes me as is it's like a death shot for the motorcycle. This almost reminds me of seeing Beth laying there on the ground at Grady with her arm going out and blood around her, only it's the motorcycle and there's this fluid around it, like gasoline or whatever. Um, so they killed the motorcycle, right? And then we have this thing where the guy's arm was shot. And then the only other thing I was thinking of is that first the arm is shot, and then they shoot each other at the same time. There's a parallel shot. And it almost made me wonder, like, so think of it this way, if this is meant to be a parallel or telling us about the sequence of how Beth was shot, right? So they're shooting at one another, and then the bike going down shows Beth going down. And actually, after this, seeing Daryl wander in the wilderness, let's go to that real fast. With no water, this is what happened in them, right? Wandering around, no water, skeletons, right? Um, this is a repeat of the sequence from season 5. Beth is shot, Daryl in the desert, no water. Um, the side by side skeletons. So if that's the case, it just makes me wonder. I mean, the parallel shots are getting to me. Like, um, there was the gunshot that hit Beth. Was there another shot at the same time? Were there two shots going on there that we just don't know about? I don't know. I don't know, but this is trying to tell us something about the arm and the parallel shots and the bike dying and all of that. Okay, and then later in the episode, Daryl even says they took my bike. Okay, so the bike was taken just like Beth was taken. Really interesting. I watched this several times because we don't know what happened during the missing 17 days. I don't know what they're trying to tell us, but there are hints here, like really tantalizing hints, and we've seen them before in the episode where Rick disappeared, right? So this is super interesting. And this, you could even say, I mean, it is a gunshot wound, so it's not like a gunshot. It is a gunshot wound, um, with stuff leaking out. It's like Beth getting shot, right? And I mean, I guess you could see the two gunshots as being the one that hit Beth and then the one Daryl shooting Dawn. They didn't happen at the same time, but maybe that. And maybe it's just trying to show us that this is, a callback to that sequence. I don't know. Um, then, of course, as I already said, we have Daryl in the desert. There's the drought, which is like them. And a lot of things about this episode are like them. I'm not going to go into this too much because I've already analyzed this a lot, but we've got two skeletons. I mean, we could assume that one is a man and one is a woman. We can't know that for sure because they're just skeletons. You can't really tell unless somebody is, a anthropologist who can, from the shot, measure hip size and figure out whether they are male or female. There's no way to know. But this is not a good thing for Daryl to be seeing in this desert because obviously other people have died in this desert from thirst. But once again, we have that limbo thing going on, right? At this point, he's kind of hovering between life and death because he has no water. He's kind of become the blind seer, and the seer said, "You're next," right? So that actually did come to pass. Not that Daryl actually died, but that he went into limbo. Um, oh, and I didn't even talk about limbo. I mean, all through this episode is the theme. That's why they call it that. But if you look up limbo in terms of religious beliefs, some Christian beliefs, it is where they think, among other things, that souls went while awaiting resurrection. So the idea was that no human being could achieve resurrection until after Christ did. So that there were souls who, plenty of people lived before Christ, and they were in limbo waiting for him to be resurrected because that was the gateway for all of them to be resurrected. And limbo is the place where people said they went. So, you guys, they're telling us this episode is called limbo. And limbo, one meaning, there are many meanings for it, but one of the meanings is literally waiting for a resurrection. In between life and death, waiting for resurrection. That's like what limbo means in Christian belief. Think about that. All right, so we have the two skeletons. Sorry, guys, I just had to leave for a couple of hours and then come back to finish the video. Like I said, a little pressed for time today. This is part of the Walker side by side theme that we see a lot. I'm not going to go into that too much today because, like I said, I already when we saw this in the trailer, I talked about it a little bit more. And then we have this thing where we see Daryl is watching this walker, and then a vulture descends on it and gets the walker. At first, I thought it might have even been the blind seer, but it looks like this walker has hair, so I'm pretty sure it's not. But the point is that the seer was right, that the vultures are coming for the dead. And I'm sure there's a theme even in that, but the seer does qualify as a prophet because of that. And then Daryl keeps walking. So then we see him in the evening as it's getting dark, and then we're going to get a little bit more of a flashback. And this flashback does something interesting. It changes a little bit what we've seen thus far. We see someone telling him, "You've got to go," and someone walks into the room. I tried to get a few shots of this, but it's difficult because it's blurry and it's very quick. Then we get this picture. Sorry, the play button is in the middle. Again, I had to stop it and pause it in order to get the picture. This seems to be a man in this vest here, right? And then you'll notice there are actually other people standing here too. There's a guy working on a truck here, and I think this is a woman sitting here. And so I went back and I kept trying to get this shot. This is not the same as the little boy we keep seeing running. So the little boy with the longer hair, darker hair, I'm assuming that's Daryl. I'm wondering if this could be young Merle. But we don't know for sure, obviously. And then here's the man with the kind of orangish red stripes on his coat as well, but this is from a different angle. So we've got a few different things going on here. From the previous angle, this is a different locale, I think. Um, Unless that's just from the trees over here. I guess it could be, but you see that looks like there's houses and vehicles, almost like a junkyard or something around it here. And of course, it's very overcast and gray looking. And this guy is looking down the street this way. Then and same angle here. But this one, it looks almost like they're out in the middle of the woods and it's lighter, like there's sunshine. And he's coming this way, like perpendicular to the trailer rather than standing by it and looking down parallel to it. So it's a little bit different. And it's interesting that someone says, "You've got to go right now. You've got to go." So it's like someone was warning him about something. And I had the thought that maybe, because the only thing we really, I've said this before, the only thing we really know about Daryl's childhood and background is the way his mother died and that he was playing with his friends when he saw the fire and came back and she was dead. Or the other thing we know is that the thing about how he had pigs when he was little, and he's told a couple of stories about that. So I'm wondering, I've had the thought that maybe this flashback has something to do with how his mother died. And especially if someone warned him, like Merle, and told him to run, and he did, and just ended up with playing with a bunch of little kids, he might have a lot of guilt over having left rather than having stayed. I mean, already that story is horrible, horrible thing to have gone through as a child. But anyway, once again, I'm very curious as to where these flashbacks are leading. So here we have him meeting the leper colony, who it says, I don't know, I didn't get the sense so much from watching the trailer, or I mean, excuse me, the episode, but in the episode Insider at the end, they do talk about how they almost wanted these lepers to be mistaken as walkers. Um, and that's interesting. In the show, I didn't really get the sense that he mistook them as walkers because he immediately started talking to them and saying, "Stay back, stay back." But you can see how they could be mistaken as walkers because they're a little bit deformed from their illness. But of course, very quickly, he realizes that they're people and he puts the gun down. And Mateo here invites him to go with them. And so they take him to their place where they live and invite him in. And he sees that this is a leper colony. And then they bring out some water and he starts demanding the water because he's very thirsty. They give him 2 cups, but then this woman, Amaya, comes out and says he can't have any more because that's all they have. I did look up the name Amaya, and as you can see, there's different meanings for it depending on the culture. I'm going to go ahead and assume we should use the Spanish name here. I mean, a lot of them work, care, protection, God has answered. Also, without guidance, so it's like leadership, which definitely works for her. She's kind of the leader of this colony. But the Spanish name specifically means path or way or road, which suggests that she is the pathway to something, which is interesting, right? The really distinctive thing about her is that she does not seem to be a leper, but she still lives with these people. I do think that in various ways she is a Beth proxy. And it's interesting then that she is living among the sick when she's not sick. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. After she tells them that that's all they have, he seems to be a little bit embarrassed and probably feels bad for demanding the water. But then Mateo shows him the cistern. I had to translate some of this to understand what it meant, but Daryl pretty much says what it is as they go along. He says, originally it used to be to collect rainwater. Um, and here we have another suggestion of a drought. Daryl is asking, did it just dry up because of the sun, because it hasn't rained in a long time? And then they say, no, some bad men took it. Um, and she says that they took the water on the train. So then, of course, he's putting together what he saw, that he saw them, that train, and that's where their water is. That's the guys that took their water. Then he asks if the bad men also did this to the town because it's very blown up, right? It's been bombed out. And then we get a little bit of history here. She says, no, it's a very old civil war. And he says, Generalissimo Franco. I did look this up because I don't know anything about this Spanish Civil War. And it's actually kind of interesting. I think that they probably um, put this in on purpose. And I would just recommend everyone go read it. I mean, this Franco guy, he was someone that was very oppressive, his regime. And I think that they gave us this history on purpose. He was also somebody who had a lot to do with creating leper colonies in order to try and contain the disease. So it's relevant that way as well, as you might imagine. Um, eh, Here, let's go a little bit further here. She says he'd do this to kill the resistance. And I think she actually means the bombing. This town was very bombed out, and they actually talk about that in the episode Insider at the end. I mean, this place where they're staying, it's a real place, but it's kind of a relic. It's like a monument now because back during that Spanish Civil War, it was completely bombed out and nobody lives there anymore. But the relics, the bombed out structure is still there. And a lot of them are churches. They're really beautiful, but there's big holes in them, right? Because the bombs. So when she says he did this to kill the resistance, I assume she means the bombing. But at first I thought she meant the leprosy. I was like, they purposely spread leprosy. So I looked at I basically looked up the history of that, and what it says that this Franco guy, no, he did not spread leprosy on purpose, but that he was big in trying to contain the illness, right? Um, so I mean, I'm not going to go into it too deep, but at the end of the day, I do feel like this, if you haven't figured this out, this is a big parable for something. And, you could see the leprosy as being a parable for the Walker virus. And um, these people are being marginalized because they're sick. And I feel like the woman leading them is going to represent Beth in some way. Maybe in that Beth doesn't get sick because either she's immune or because she's had the cure or whatever it ends up being they were doing at Grady. I feel like this is lining up some way. So he says, why do you all live here? There's no other place because they're lepers and they're actually called limbo. So it means that they are also in limbo. And um, they talk about that in the episode Insider as well, that they, use that as the title for the episode because these people are being marginalized. They're almost treated like walkers, like they're already dead, but they're not. They just have an illness. Um, and he says that here, no is living, not dead. And then this is where Daryl asks her how come she's not a leper, and she says that she can touch somewhat and it's safe, just not very much. So I actually, because I was reading about leprosy, I did read up about this. This is a really widely misunderstood disease. And for the most part, in the past, it was just a matter of ignorance. That most people did believe if you touched a leper, you would get leprosy, and that's just not true. Now they believe it's spread through the air, like if a person with leprosy coughs and the molecules go into the air and then you breathe them in, then you can get it. But even then, doing it once or twice or just a little bit usually isn't enough. You have to have long, exposure, a lot of it, in order to actually get it. For the most part, this is caused by a bacteria. And so it's not even something that's really contagious unless you're exposed to the bacteria. And 95% of the population naturally has immunity to the bacteria anyway. So the only people that really get this are people who don't have immunity to the bacteria. And like I said, that's like only like 5% of the population. And beyond that, yes, you can get it from a person. So to say that it's not contagious isn't entirely correct. But again, you would have to have a lot and very long time exposure to them breathing on you. I mean, tons and tons and tons in order for you to get it. So anyway, the point is, I guess, that you can see why this would be a parallel to the Walker virus because we're talking about different kinds of immunity and different kinds of transmission and who's going to get it versus who's not going to get it and all of that. So just really interesting. All right, so he tells them that the man on the train took his bike. He's trying to get to Barcelona. They have a truck that he can use. And basically, they say, if you'll go get our water back for us, we will let you use the truck. Um, and then she says, 4 or 5 days, we're going to die without that water. No water, no life. So you can take the evening to think about it and tell us in the morning. So for the night, he's kind of just looking around and thinking about everything. You guys, there right above him is this huge hole in the ceiling. That's hole in the roof, right? Hole in the roof theory is definitely still present here. And he sees the little girl watching him, but she doesn't come speak to him. And tell me, he's got his this is his elbow. He's got his arm behind his head. Tell me that doesn't look exactly like how he was laying in the coffin and alone, thinking about things. So he gets up in the morning and he tells them that he will help them. And they're all really excited about that. See, there's murmuring. They're all happy that he's going to help them. And I think I noticed too that I think a big theme here is not only him helping people who need help, but the kind of person who has faith that he can help them and that he will save them. I'll tell you what I mean by that. I'll come back to it in just a minute. So he gets them to help him, but he realizes that it's not going to be a good idea to go take these on just him one on one, right? So he tells them he's only got 4 bullets and we got to fight them. We saw this in the trailer. So he tells them to get rope and we see him creating these spiky projections, which they're going to put in the road too. Let me go back. They ask him what he thinks of them, and it's kind of a fun callback to Isabel saying de paysan, and he says, they're good. And again, they're all very they're happy to hear that. Like it almost it's surprising that it matters to them so much what his opinion is. You would think they would just be like, whatever, we don't care what he thinks, but that's not. They're happy. And I think it does have to do with the fact that they are lepers specifically, not so much with nationality, but the fact that he sees them, despite being sick like that, he sees them as people who are worth defending and worth saving. And that leaves a big impression on them, right? It's really very sweet. So here we are, he's creating these projections, which we'll see him use later. Then we have this scene. Okay, here's the got a lot to say about this too. This is where the little girl gives him her water. Okay, this sweet little girl. Um, she hands him her jug, and everybody watches him right here really closely. And again, even though they don't say it, I think this has to do with the illness. It's not so much that he has much chance of getting leprosy by drinking from her water, but I think that's a common misconception. And so most people would probably smack her hand away, like not very nice people, and be like, I don't want to drink that. I don't want to get sick, you know. But he does. He drinks it. Um, okay. Hippo, this is like the cutest mug ever. The other thing I'm going to say, even before we go on, is that thanks to WD Way for finding me this, the hippo actually is very subtly, very, very subtly, um, entangled with Beth symbolism. So, okay, I'll find the picture. Hold on. Okay, again, thanks to WD Way for digging this up because I would not have thought that there was any hippos. I think maybe the reason using the hippo, it could have to do with water. It is a water animal, but this is from the distance, which is 5:13 when Aaron shows up in the barn, okay? We have toilet paper, we have the flare gun, which is fire. This is the music box that has just recently woken up, and this is a hippo. So we have had hippo symbolism entangled with Beth symbolism before. So you guys, 100% this little girl is a Beth proxy. Okay, she is. And we see her bond in such a sweet way with Daryl. It's important that she gives him water. Okay. Water is life-giving, and he gives her that. And again, I don't want this to sound at all creepy, like he's in love with this little girl or having romantic feelings about her at all. But it's just sweet the way that he bonds with her and the way that he looks at her, even though she's sick and she has this disease. I mean, she's a beautiful child. And her dad is looking at Daryl, and so this is a little bit later, but you know the leader Amaya is looking at him, and I must not have gotten pictures of this, but he drinks it and then gives it back to her and says thank you, and there's just this really really sweet connection there. But she is what I mean when I say she is someone who has faith in him. She has faith just by looking at him and knows that he is going to help them and is going to save them. You can tell just by the way she watches things. And then we have something interesting that comes up a little bit later with her. But the hippo specifically shows that she is a Beth proxy. Um, so this is when they're leaving. He says, God be with you. And Amaya is a little bit skeptical of him. She says, Mateo thinks she'll bring us water. I think you're going to leave us to die. And I mean, he could. He doesn't have to help them. He could get in the truck and drive away and never come back, you know. So she's a little bit nervous about that. But of course, he's not going to do that. I think it's important that the truck is yellow. It is not all yellow. It's like yellow and brown, but it is yellow. He goes, and here's the other instance of the rearview mirror, and he sees them coming. So they don't, and The Walking Dead does this a lot. They don't explain what the plan is. We just see them prepping for the plan, and so it gives us clues, but we don't see what the full plan is until it actually plays out. So it becomes obvious eventually that the whole point was for him to leave and lead these guys, the Banditos, whatever they're called, back to this community so that they can take care of them there, so that they cannot keep coming back and stealing the water, right? So he says here, Mateo says he's been gone a long time. Maybe you were right. Maybe he just took off and left. But then they see them coming, and this little girl, here they are. Oh, they call them buzzards. She smiles when she sees them because that would mean also that Daryl is bringing them back. They see the truck coming, but she smiles almost. She has this huge smile, you know, her teeth showing, like she's like, I knew it. I knew he was coming back. Okay. Now we have this part. This is the part I was talking about, something interesting with her. Look at this little girl's eyes. She has beautiful eyes, but they are golden brown. They look exactly like Carol's eyes in the opening credits. And they look exactly, I don't have a picture of this, I apologize, but we have seen other artwork for season 3 in which Daryl has the same color. So it's not in the opening credits. We only see Carol's eyes being brown in the opening credits because the representation of Daryl in the opening credits, he's got his eyes closed. But there was a thing that Norman posted where he was like defacing a picture that was of him and Daryl Dixon season 3, where he was like putting a mustache on it and just goofing around, but he had brown eyes in that looked like this too. So everyone's been wondering what's up with the brown eyes. I think this is the answer. This little girl, she's got really striking eyes, and they really fixate on her eyes right here with the camera, right? It's like they're wanting us to see these brown eyes. And she is somebody who has faith that Daryl's going to save them. She believes what's going on. She's not fearful at all. She's rather just very calm, and there's a wisdom in her. It's one of those things where she seems older than her years, and that's understandable why that would be the case. I mean, she lives a really hard life. She's a leper. She lives with lepers. They are marginalized. They're probably fighting for their lives and wondering if they're going to survive every few days, depending on how much food and water they can get. She lives a difficult existence, and that's going to make her mature much faster than a normal child. Anyway, so during this part, she's watching. She sees Daryl return and get out of the truck, and then she sees these guys, the buzzards as they call them, all of them here. So she sees all of this playing out, and then she says, "Four demons," meaning the buzzards, four bullets. And then as the fight goes through, she hears gunshots and she counts them. So she knows as she hears the gunshots that it means the bad guys are being killed. And she doesn't have any doubt about that. She's not ever worried that maybe one of those was shooting Daryl or one of those was shooting someone in her town. She just believes, hardcore believes, that each of those shot is him killing one of the demons and that he is going to save them from these guys. So it's really lovely, how much faith she has in him, even though she doesn't know him and they don't even speak the same language. So we get the first one who comes off his bike. Daryl shoots him and she says one. She starts making these little grooves in the sand. The second one, I thought this was kind of funny. He talks to this lady who is cooking something and he doesn't try to hurt her, but he just says, "Where is he?" And she points and then he gets shot and she smiles. I thought this lady was funny. She says two. There's the groove she's making in the sand. There's also, I don't think I got a good shot of this, but this is a little truck that we see it several times here. It's more of a blue-green, but it reminds me of all the little toy fire trucks we've seen, only it's not that. It's more like a pickup truck. The third one, I didn't get very good pictures of this either, but climbs up these rocks and we hear her get shot, or him, I should say, and then we just see the helmet fall, and she says three. And then this is the last one, this guy, who he sees Daryl going into the church here, and we hear the gunshot, and she says four, but this is a gunshot that doesn't actually kill him. It seems to have hit his hand. Actually, I think the blood is coming from further up his arm, like in his wrist, and uh, it looks like it's dripping down onto his hand. And clearly Daryl did hurt him, but it wasn't a kill shot. So I thought about that and I wasn't sure exactly what to make of it. I mean, we have an example of a bullet that didn't kill when it should have. So there's that. But if he was shot in the wrist, that's also very um, coded to Christ's crucifixion because nails were put in the palms of his hands, but also in his wrists so that the nails in the palms did not tear through. I don't know if that's what they're going for here, but I was just trying to think about what this might mean. Obviously, he gets really angry and starts screaming. We also have this right here. Um, we still haven't entirely figured out what this means. People have tried to uh, translate it, and it doesn't make a ton of sense, but it does talk about like mating rituals a little bit and young women and their fathers. I mean, it just the different patches of words that are being used almost makes it sound like they're talking either about love or about young women who are being taken from their fathers. So it just feels very uh, relevant, right, to what's going on in this season. Anyway, this guy yells. He uh, charges Daryl at the end. The episode Insider, Norman talks about this weapon. Obviously, Norman had tons of fun playing with his toys here and his weapons. He said this was super cool. It's actually considered a katana, which is similar to what Michonne carries, but it swings open like a switchblade. So he had fun with this. Um, and then because they can hear him yelling, the bad guy, she can hear him yelling. So she knows at least that that bullet didn't actually kill him. And this is the only time she looks a little bit nervous and like she's afraid. But of course, then the guy charges Daryl on the bike and Daryl cuts his throat, finally killing him. And then he kind of stands up here, but then clearly he is bleeding out and he dies. And then all of the lepers come out and look at him, and you can just tell they're very grateful because Daryl saved them. So there was that. Again, so much going on in this episode. We had the beginning part, which was Carol and Antonio taking Roberto home, lying to Fede. Then we have Daryl in the desert. We have the blind prophet. We have him losing his bike, meeting these people, deciding to help them, getting them set up for the battle, actually conducting the battle. And now, only now, do we still have to go and get the water, which is on the train, right? So this is famously the guy that we saw in the trailer that everyone was wondering if that was Daryl is not. He is just leading the walkers. So we have basically three different cars here. This first one, this is actually this black top is all one, which is the one that the guy is in who was taking the bath, right? Then there's a smaller one back here that's white, and we've got a couple of guys working, one on top, one inside, which I'll show you. I'll show you if I got a picture of. And then there's another thing they're pulling behind them that's metal, and that's what is holding the water. Um, so we see this guy singing, we see the walkers, yada yada. This is probably the best picture we have of this guy's face. We don't really see him very well. And he's not actually a huge part of the plot. He's just singing and leading the walkers. They're trying to follow him, but they're tied to the train, shackled to the train, so they're pulling the train. Um, Daryl looks down at the train. He jumps up. There's a lot of yellow going on here. And I assume that's because it is a rescue of sorts. I know he's not rescuing a person right here. He's rescuing the water. But water equals Beth, right? But also it's a rescue mission. So this is yellow. Like I said, the truck he was in before was yellow. This guy's got yellow that he's wearing. This is the guy inside. So I didn't capture this, but the body fell. So, and that's why he's looking down. And then he sees him. See all the yellow this guy's wearing? Here's the bike. And this is interesting because he just, Daryl said they stole my bike. So it's also him, it's rescuing the water, but he's also rescuing his own bike. And remember that in Diverged, we talked about how his bike breaking down and him fixing it, how that felt kind of Beth coded. It's a lot of symbols coming together here. Some of these, here's another bike that's red, another example of a bicycle. This is him. At first I thought he was uncoupling the train cars, but he's not. He's actually releasing the walkers. So the train stops because the walkers are no longer pulling it. Like they release the walkers keep going, but the train stops because they aren't pulling it anymore. So this guy's going, okay, what's going on? This guy sees the walkers continuing when the train is not. And then the guy who's singing and playing the guitar really quickly goes down. The walkers get him. The horse actually runs and gets away. So the horse makes it, but the guy does not, and the walkers eat him. You can see more yellow here with this guy, and then Daryl tackles him. Again, so once again, there's so much movement going on here that it's really difficult to get very good screenshots. But this is the woman. She runs away. We don't really see what happens to her. I don't know that we see her die, but I'm gonna kind of assume that she does. Um, this was me trying to get Daryl coming in through the window. Again, almost impossible to get the shot, but the other guy is blowing up the roof with gunshots, right? Because he thinks Daryl's up there, and then Daryl swings in through the window. Then the walkers come in and they keep backing up until they're almost, until they are back to back. And then this part, it's just kind of goofy. They both stop to take a breather. This guy's trying to get his knife out and it's stuck. And I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. Like we see this walker with the knife stuck in its throat, so it's not dead. It's just pinned to the wall and he can't get his knife out. But then they both stop and decide to take a breather. And I mean, understandable. It is exhausting fighting walkers like they were. I'm sure I would want a breather too. But it's funny that they're like, okay, well, we're going to kill each other, but let's just take a minute to rest first. It just made me laugh. Then the guy tries to grab a gun, but Daryl uh, rushes him and ends up drowning him in the tub. And this is kind of an irony. It's a poetic justice because the the water is a symbol of what he's taking from other people, right? What he's luxuriating in a bath with his girlfriend, while there are other people who are dying of thirst, and then it's ironic, but also just, poetically just that that same water is what was his undoing. He's drowned in the water. And then Daryl does shoot him in the head to make sure he's dead, which I was actually thinking, I was like, yeah, but what if he's faking or something? So Daryl made sure that he was not going to reanimate. And then again, we just see this walker that's still alive, but it's pinned by its throat with the knife. It's just kind of a random thing. And then they did get the water. So they all come to the train to get the water out. See, this is the metal thing that's holding all the water. And it seems like there's a lot of water in there. That will probably last them for a bit. They all say thank you to Daryl. He's going to Barcelona. He shakes hands. We see the bike, and then this little girl comes up to him again and gives him her water bottle. And again, so not only is this really sweet and this is Beth thing, but it's like she's, because the hippo is a symbol of Beth, it's almost like she's giving him Beth. And by putting that on the back of his bike, it's showing that he's heading toward Beth and that he's going to find her and bring her back. He's going to, I don't want to say take possession of her, that sounds strange, but you know what I mean? Like she's going to be with him just as this little girl's bottle with the hippo is now with him. But the other thing that I noticed here, there we go. He says Rosa, and that's her name. And he must have just picked that up when he was in the leper colony. And she says yes, and then he says, I'm Daryl. And she tries to say his name. See, oh, she's so cute. Her smile is so cute. But the point is, I looked up her name. I was going, I think Rosa is rose. I think it means pink, and it does. Her name in Spanish means pink. And you guys, Beth, one of her colors is pink. Okay. Like the symbolism just doesn't let up. It's everywhere. And I can't get over how cute this little girl is. Anyway, so even the yellow ribbon, look, the yellow, yeah, it doesn't let up. So I almost see this as Beth riding on the back of his bike. That's kind of how I'm interpreting that. And then he heads down the tracks. And even the shot of him heading down the tracks is really important because, train tracks, they're obviously a big thing, a big symbol in The Walking Dead, but especially because of 509. In 509, we got so many shots of this where it would show train tracks disappearing into the woods and the camera is moving along the tracks as though the camera person is walking along and heading into the woods. And I've said this many times that I think the tracks, it might have multiple meanings, but one of them is that it represents a pathway. So the fact that we saw this, and it was during Tyrese's death hallucination, but he was dying. So his path really was toward death. So this could have represented his path to the other side, right? But because they were around Beth, I think this also represents her path disappearing into the woods for a while and being different than Team Family's path. It's the same as the divergence. It's showing that she's taking a different path. But the train tracks, I do believe, represent her path. And so when we see this, it's like he's following the path to her, right? And once again, this seemed at this part like everything was really, it was really sweet storyline. It kind of got all buttoned up, got a bow put on it. Oh, I forgot about this, the iguana. Okay. The iguana is yellow. And it's the thing that was eating the eyeballs, which makes it feel like a really twisted form of serious symbolism. I don't know if it is. But the fact that the iguana crosses the tracks. We always said in season 4 that Beth and Daryl crossed the tracks where everybody else followed them into Terminus. And Daryl did follow it later when he found Rick and Michonne, but with Beth, they crossed the tracks. Um, and then I don't know. I also feel like because there's a lot more that I didn't even talk about that I could go into, which I'm really not going to. Like, was this iguana kind of a captive of the bad guy? I mean, it's a pet, so we can't really ask it whether it wanted to be there or not, but it could be. We could see it that way. At one point, the woman called it a snake, which I thought was odd because it's not a snake, it's a lizard. Why would you call it a snake? Just say it's a lizard. I mean, you can be equally disgusted by lizards as by snakes if you're not someone who likes reptiles, right? So it was kind of strange. And then at the end, when everyone's pretty much forgotten about this animal, it crosses the tracks. And I will say too that when they were shooting up the train, when Daryl was crouched down after he came in through the window, there's a very clear shot of them shooting something that looks like the iguana's tank. And then there's what looks like water spilling out. So it almost does look like a gunshot wound. Um, so is this supposed to represent that she lived, she got away? Is this supposed to represent Beth at all? Is it more supposed to represent the bad guys who are behind him? Or I don't know. But it's, again, super interesting. So anyway, as I was saying before, this feels like it was really, really buttoned up and it felt like the end of the episode. It was kind of like, ah, but then after this, we had another 20 minutes of Daryl and Antonio and Valentina. So it's like, how did they fit all this into one episode? There's so much going on here. Um, so Valentina shows up to visit Roberto, and this kind of made me laugh. This is Gustavo. I don't know if you guys remember in the first episode when we saw him, I was like, I know he looks imposing, but I think he's kind of a softie, and we totally see him being a softie. See, he's like, "Oh, you're visiting Roberto." He reminds me of Jerry. Anyway, so Valentina goes to visit him, asks if he'll be all right. This is where we're going to get a little bit more of the limbo. Roberto's soul is stuck between hope and despair, between wanting to live and feeling ready to give up. Now, obviously, title of the episode, the theme that I've been talking about the whole time, but we can also see this is where Daryl has been, and still is. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of the characters for a lot of the series are in this place because they're between hope and despair. And, when they lose somebody, when they can't move past their own tragedies, that's when they're in limbo. Daryl's been there since he lost Beth, really. And we've seen Carol finally move past that. You could say she's out of limbo. She's hopeful. She's excited for the future. She's pursuing possibly a relationship here, right? Um, but Daryl is not. He's still in limbo. So it's really important. And remember that limbo is the place where we are awaiting the resurrection. So it's like being in the state of limbo, and then she says, we will pull him back. And I was going to say, too, this also reminds me a little bit of Beth in season 2. This is where she was when she tried to commit suicide, was between hope and despair, and, the whole thing where Andrea left her alone and said she discovered that she actually wants to live. That was pulling her out of the limbo. He says they need more of something, so Carol's going to go get it with him. Valentina, she cracks me up. She knows everything. She's like, oh, okay. So we see them talking. She says she doesn't like so many people judging her here. And then she starts teasing Carol about Antonio, saying, oh, you prefer the local wine. And then Carol says, don't take this the wrong way. Has anyone ever told you you are a horny old lady? And Valentina says, they usually don't call me a lady. So this, anyway, just very funny, very cute conversation. Um, so then this is Fayde's mother, remember? So it's Justina's grandmother, and she finds the compass necklace that Roberto has. So then we have this scene between Carol and Antonio. Okay, so he says, was Valentina bending your ear? And she says, she bent it a little, I guess. This is another example of the hear no evil thing, like they're drawing attention to that. He says she's nosy. She says that they're still going to America. What are your plans? He says, this is home for me, and he doesn't really want to start over again. He says, I tried it once, it didn't end well. I'm assuming he means Barcelona. I'm assuming he means when he took Roberto's mother there and Roberto was a child. And again, that's more of the past that we just really haven't heard yet. I'm kind of assuming maybe she died there. Okay. Antonio gives her an apple. It is red. This is actually not a great sign. I know that a lot of people think she's going to stay with him. I don't know, guys. I still don't really see it happening. They were really pushing at Comic-Con that even though this series, the spinoff, is ending after season 4, there's a lot more of the character to tell. And I felt like that was for both Daryl and Carol. And then we have Lauren Cohen talking about maybe getting the super group back together. I can't imagine that they would do that, and Carol just wouldn't be part of it. I don't know. Like everyone says, it's always possible that Melissa McBride could ask to be written out because she's just kind of wants to be done. And if that's the case, then maybe that would be true. But I don't know. I don't really see it happening personally. Here she is, and I'll keep going with the conversation. She basically asks him to come with her. That I can see happening because before Justina was taken, Roberto and Justina were planning to go with Daryl and Carol, and Daryl had agreed to it. So if Antonio's son, who he loves, obviously, is going to be in America, and Carol, who he's developing feelings for, is going to be in America, then that would be where his home is where the people he loves is. So I can see him going with her. That I can see. But we have an apple here, and the camera focuses on it. The red apple in particular, it actually does not signify death, but it does signify separation. So remember that Rick and Michonne in 614 or 615, one of those, were both eating an apple, taking bites of a red apple, and that was a foreshadow of them being separated when Rick went into the CRM. We didn't see apples specifically around Connie before she disappeared that I recall, but we saw them when she returned, and it was red and green apples. And the green, just as I always say that the red and green are death and resurrection, right? But it can also specifically, like those colors can be anything. We see them in strings, we see them in shoelaces, we see them in clothing, we see them all over the place. With apples, I think specifically with the apple, it represents separation and possibly a death fake out. And then the green apples represent reunion afterward. So that's why we saw a mixture of the red and green apples in the crate that Daryl dropped when he saw Connie and then went and hugged her. So the fact that we're seeing an apple here, this is really telling me that they're going to be separated in some way and that there might be a death fake out involved. So yeah, again, not a great sign for their happiness, at least not right away. But anyway, she asks him to come to Ohio. She says that a person like you could come to like it. Um, and he's not terribly receptive to that. He gets really nervous and says they got to go back. So that wasn't exactly an I'm all in kind of reaction. Justina's grandmother gives the necklace to Fede, and this is just to show that she's suspecting that what Carol and Antonio have told them happened is not all that happened. And at first, Fede just says, "Oh, you're wrong. You know, he probably left it." And she just kind of accepts that. Grandma's intelligent, you know, she doesn't push, she doesn't try to force her opinion on him, but she knows she's planting seeds. And then this this one reaction cracked me up too. She says, "Stop eating chocolate, damn it, or you won't eat later." And when she walks away, he glares at her and eats more chocolate. It's just so human. I'm not saying I don't do it. We all do it. Someone tells you not to do something, you're going to do the exact opposite just to prove that you can, but it just made me laugh. But it did work, her planting that seed, because he has Sergio here go to the beach to check on Daryl, and obviously Daryl is not going to be there. So then we end with Antonio praying, and I thought this was a really sweet way to end. He says, "Thank you, Lord, for looking after my boy and nursing him back to health. Please help Daryl find Justina and bring her back home." The storytelling is so wonderful here, and it just makes you go, "Ah, we need the next episode." But they end with Daryl running, or not running, riding off into the fog, looking for Justina. And here, I don't know if I got a picture of it, but Antonio takes Carol's hand. And that's pretty much it for the episode. Now, let's see. I don't know. I probably mentioned everything I took a picture of here as we were going through the episode. So this is where Isabel says mid-season, Daryl becomes finally fully engaged in the Justina and Roberto story, which Carol has been engaged in earlier. And notice they're showing this scene where they are watching Antonio hug Roberto. They've been at odds a bit about that, but we really see it hit full throttle in episode 5, Limbo. This is the one where they most consciously and aggressively leaned into the spaghetti western. This is where they're talking about Limbo as the name of the group of people in the desert. And you almost want them to think it's walkers for a minute, and then all of a sudden they start talking. So most of these things I addressed already. They're kind of between the living and the dead because they're not perceived as fully acceptable in human society. And they're sometimes sort of treated as if they were walkers, but they're not walkers. They're just humans with a disease. This is the town they filmed in. The National Monument of, I want to say Relchite, I don't know if that's right, which is from the Spanish Civil War, is a town that was bombed mercilessly. It's visually stunning. There are these churches that really are bombed out like that. They're just fantastic relics, but a lot of beauty in them. So you understand why they filmed there. These people regularly come and take water from them, and knowing Daryl's character quite well, this is not something that he'll let abide. And they're making a point to show us this particular scene while they're talking about this. And then they talk about this sequence, which they just say it was really hard. It was a lot of work, but it was really fun. Everybody liked it. It's kind of like Outlaw Josie Wales, if I can speak, or Mad Max. And actually, W.D. Way said that she thought of Mad Max while she was watching it. So then when she saw The Insider, she felt very validated. I did want to say that I didn't notice this going through, but there's a boombox here, which is also a music reference. This is them getting the water back. Oh, I think this is where he said the thing about, yeah, it's just a really lovely parable. And I'm not sure exactly which parable he's talking about. Could it just be a matter of sort of a social thing where people are being sidelined because they're ill? And, you know, what relevance does that have to our society? Or is he maybe hinting that this is a deeper parable about something that's going on in the show? He doesn't say, he just says it's a lovely parable. So I'm totally reading into that on many levels. the middle of our story, which is kind of Western tale. I think that's the last picture that I got. So yeah, I will end it there because this is a long video, and I apologize for that. But there was so much to talk about, and I could talk about a lot more. Like I was really glazing over some of it. So feel free to send in the details that you find so that I can discuss them when I get your asks. And yeah, this was just one heck of an episode. This I hope this knocked everyone's socks off because I loved it. And it was really, really fun to go through and figure out. It just took a while because there was so much. And again, I'm not even going that deep on most of it. So I will end it there. I will try to get some videos out later this week. And everyone have a wonderful Sunday, and I will talk to you again soon.